Hello, everybody. My name is Shortline819, and welcome back to Shortline's Rail News and Comment. It's been a while. Sorry if I dropped off the face of the earth. Going off to college will sort of do that to you. Logistics and supply chain management. Gee, I wonder why I'm doing that. But I'm coming with to you today. Uh, well, May 9th, 2024, at 12:15 a.m. Talk about the Norfolk Southern proxy vote that's going to happen, well, technically today, yeah, by the time you're probably seeing this. Um, Norfolk Southern, Ancora, all this stuff, and just a little bit of my sort of thoughts on the subject. But what happens if Ancora wins? What happens if Ancora loses? So let's get into it. And the first thing to sort of keep in mind, and this was brought up by someone on train orders. I don't remember their name. They brought up a really excellent point, which is that you know, we like to think of, stocks and whatnot as sort of stock and companies being owned by individual people, individual shareholders. And I will disclaim that while I'm not technically a Norfolk Southern shareholder, my people in my family are, and of course I voted for them on their behalf. I voted for the current NS management, so of course I'm not entirely. This is a biased video, just to get that out of the way. But while we tend to think of individual in terms of individual stockholders, but you have to remember that with Norfolk Southern, and this is the case with most companies, which is most stock is not owned by individual shareholders. It's owned by institutional investment firms. And ultimately, they are the ones, to a large degree, to the overwhelming degree, they are the ones who are going to be deciding this. So that's one thing to keep in mind. Now, Ancora themselves. When looking at Ancora and reading them and the general sort of vibe that I get from them, and what they sort of remind me of is, they're very confident going into this. Almost like that they're just sort of expecting, you know, kind of like what happened to Fred Green in Canadian Pacific in 2012 when Harrison showed up at his door, where, Harrison showed up and he, basically all the directors and the majority of stockholders were like, get Fred Green out, and, the vote was more of a formality. They're very confident going into this. Um, and their confidence sort of reminds me, right? I can't help but think of back a couple of years ago when the battle for Kansas City Southern, where Canadian National they went in there with Canadian National, they had were willing to pay billions of more dollars for KCS than Canadian Pacific was. Their plan was a much safer bet. CPKC carries a decent amount of risk to it that simply CNKCS didn't. Um, their plan was much more achievable in the short term. They had a lot of shipper support, and they basically expected to, well, walk in there and gobble up KCS, no problem. Of course, that they actually made the same mistake Hunter Harrison did when back during the CPNS merger, where you know mergers are ultimately exercises in politics, right? And Harrison didn't realize that with CPNS, and CN didn't realize this with CNKCS, where you can have the superior proposal on paper, but if the political winds are against you, which they were, it's not going to happen. And frankly, the political winds is why CPKC is a thing now, and CN has to settle for buying Iowa shortlines. Now, of course, even though I think CN, Ancora is displaying the same confidence that sort of CN had, we do have to recognize that this is a much different ballgame than that. Mergers, as I said, mergers are ultimately exercises in politics. While in a proxy vote like this, politics is more or less a sideshow, right? You have, Chairman Oberman who's retiring in a very short period of time. I don't remember if it's a few days or a few weeks. Um, he came out and basically said, I don't like Ancor's plan, stuff like that. You have rail labor, although rail labor has actually gotten really interesting with some of the unions flipping for Ancora and most of them still being against, which, you know, one has to sort of question that, but I'm not going to that. Maybe By the way, if you're a member, anyone watching, if you're a member of some of the unions who switched their sides and supported for Ancora, I'd be quite curious about what y'all think in the comments below. But you know, ultimately, proxy votes are an exercise in convincing those institutional investors. And has Ancora done that? And the answer is we won't know until tomorrow. Um, Ancora they've come out with all sorts of wonderful, wonderful plans and wonderful schemes about how they're going to fix up Norfolk Southern. In the short term, they're going to do all these wonderful things. In the medium term and the long term, they want to get down to a 55% operating ratio. Which how they're going to do that is explained through you know the most vague terminology and whatnot. Their plan also sort of relies on soliciting a whole bunch of new merchandise traffic. More than any other railroad, which sounds all fine and good, and that sounds wonderful. But when you have shippers who are saying, if Ancora takes over the railroad and institutes their operational changes, we're not gonna, we're just gonna, we're gonna leave. We're gonna, leave for CSX or leave for trucks or whatnot or stuff like that. Is that really achievable? And I do sort of wonder if, in these institutional investment firms, you know, the folks there, they're sort of thinking, they're looking at these plans, we're saying, this is all fine and good, this is wonderful. But if there's not something in the back of their minds, which is basically saying, yeah, this all sounds wonderful, but we have no confidence in Ancora's ability to actually pull this off. So that's sort of something to keep in mind. And if Ancora loses, it possibly could be because of that, where they have the wonderful plan, but a lot of people, a lot of the institutional investors have no faith in that plan actually being executed. Now, if they do lose, that I think sort of in large part sort of puts to bed the Wall Street driven short term sort of mindset that we've seen railroads adopt for the past decade or so. Not entirely. I don't think that's ever really going to go away to a sizable degree, but it will certainly be lessened. And I think overall, personally, that would probably be better for the industry long term. If they win, however, um, I think that's going to encourage a lot of other activist investors to try the same at other railroads. Other railroads who have sort of taken the sort of line, focus less on the operating ratio, more on the growth strategy. CSX comes to mind foremost. Um, Hell, even BNSF. I know BNSF is privately owned. They're owned by Berkshire Hathaway, Warren Buffett, which has of course been a benefit. But they recently had their earnings statement, and their operating ratio is same as Norfolk Southern, still really high. And of course, part of the reason why BNSF is sort of taking a clobbering in the OR department is because, well, the decline of Powder River coal, which coal coal always helps your OR. I think back to the 50s, that brief period of time where the Norfolk and Western, they had absorbed the Virginian, but it hadn't yet expanded out into the Midwest through the Nickel Plate and the Wabash. They had their OR at like 50, 1960, which was something crazy at the time. But there'll definitely be some investors who are like, well, if Ancora can pull it off at NS, we could pull it off at this company. Doesn't mean they'll succeed, but they'll try. Um. So yeah. Was there anything else I was going to say? I don't remember. I feel like there was one more thing that I was going to say. But well, yeah. Thanks for watching. Hopefully more videos soon. It is the summer, so. But well, thank you all for watching, and yeah, I'd be curious to see what you all think about this. Apologies for this big rambly video. I don't know. I got the itch, so why not? Thank you all for watching, and I'll see you all in the next one. Goodbye, everybody.